The McLaren MCL-39 and Ferrari SF-25 were largely anonymous throughout the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, failing to make any significant impact in the midfield, and they were continuously hampered by long DRS trains as well as a noticeable lack of overall pace compared to the front-running cars. Ferrari, in particular, experienced significant difficulties in managing tire temperatures during the Grand Prix, a challenge that became especially evident during heavy braking zones. To understand in greater detail why these two teams struggled relative to the benchmark performance of Mercedes and Red Bull, it is useful to analyze the average telemetry data across the two main stints of the race and examine the key points of their performance deficits. During the opening portion of the Baku race, the issues Charles Leclerc experienced with the energy recovery phase of the Ferrari SF-25 were less immediately obvious but still subtly present. In the final third of the track, the Monegasque was able to maintain a pace comparable to his rivals by taking advantage of slipstreams and drag reduction system opportunities. However, in the first two sectors of the lap, Charles was consistently the slowest driver on track. Observing the telemetry data related to the progressive average lap time gap relative to competitors, it is clear that the deficit primarily appeared during pure braking zones and the critical phase of corner entry, where precision and grip are essential. This particular issue is strongly linked to tire temperatures being lower than the ideal operating window. The largest braking deficits for Charles Leclerc were recorded in turns 1 and 3, highlighting how sensitive the Ferrari SF-25 was to tire temperature variations. The long high-speed straights in Baku exacerbated the problem by overcooling the tires, reducing longitudinal grip significantly during braking zones. Furthermore, Charles had to adopt a more conservative approach than would have been ideal because the rear end of the Ferrari SF-25 did not generate sufficient traction under acceleration, which forced him to compromise the entry phase into corners. In practice, the proportion of lap time during which Charles Leclerc's tires were operating within the optimal temperature window was extremely limited. Between the Ferrari and the McLaren, differences in setup were relatively minor, primarily related to aerodynamic configuration. Lewis Hamilton, by comparison, did not experience the same level of difficulty during corner entry phases. However, Lewis Hamilton adopted a slightly different driving approach, deliberately focusing on maximizing speed at the apex of corners. This strategy, while increasing cornering velocity, came at the cost of slightly reduced traction out of the corners. George Russell was the only driver who came close to matching Max Verstappen's performance in the central sector of the lap, specifically by favoring phases of acceleration to boost top speed. This approach proved logical considering the high level of efficiency demonstrated by the Brackley team's Mercedes W16 cars during the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Even though George Russell braked slightly earlier than Max Verstappen, he was able to achieve better peak velocities, partially aided by slipstreaming on the long straights. Max Verstappen, on the other hand, deliberately delayed his brake input to carry higher speed through the middle of the corners, a tactic that helped him generate higher lateral loads on the tires, which in turn assisted in keeping tire temperatures within the ideal range. It is worth noting that both the Red Bull RB21 and the Mercedes W16 transfer more energy into the tires than the Ferrari SF-25, which contributed significantly to their superior performance in Baku. Furthermore, Max Verstappen was not operating at the absolute limit of the car, as he carefully modulated braking in turn 13 and applied the throttle with caution exiting turn 12. These precise adjustments allowed him to maintain optimal tire performance while managing overall pace efficiently. Throughout the entirety of the race, Lando Norris was unable to fully exploit the performance potential of the McLaren MCL-39. This was largely due to being held up by slower cars ahead, which prevented him from managing his tires in the most effective manner. Only once the McLaren had a lighter fuel load did Lando Norris manage to reach top speeds comparable to those of his primary rivals. In the second stint, when running on the Pirelli Yellow Band tires, Lewis Hamilton's main challenge was navigating slower corners, particularly turns 5, 6, and 7, where he was losing approximately 0.3 of a second per lap relative to competitors. Much like his teammate Charles Leclerc had experienced in the first stint, Lewis Hamilton was negatively affected by the drop in temperature of the Yellow Band Pirelli tires on the straights, which made precise corner entry more difficult. The effect of the cooling tires meant that Lewis Hamilton had to adopt a slightly more conservative entry approach into corners to avoid upsetting the balance of the SF-25. Overall, when compared with the first stint of the race, during which he ran on the harder Pirelli compound, Lewis Hamilton's second stint was significantly smoother and more manageable. The on-track performance throughout the second stint confirmed that the changes made by both the driver and the team allowed for more consistent lap times and improved tire management. The Ferrari SF-25's struggles under braking during the Azerbaijan Grand Prix illustrate a combination of technical and strategic factors. Low tire temperatures, long high-speed straights, and less than optimal rear traction created a scenario where the car consistently underperformed relative to its main rivals, Mercedes and Red Bull. Charles Leclerc's challenges in maintaining tire temperature, particularly in the opening stint, highlight the importance of both mechanical grip and aerodynamic efficiency in achieving competitive lap times. Similarly, Lewis Hamilton's adaptation to the medium tires during the second stint demonstrates the delicate balance between maximizing speed through corners and preserving tire performance over longer stints. When analyzing the telemetry and performance data from Baku, it becomes clear that Ferrari's SF-25 faced a compounded problem. On one hand, the car's braking stability was compromised by low tire temperatures, while on the other, the rear tires did not provide sufficient traction to allow for aggressive corner entry. Both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton were forced to adopt a conservative approach, limiting their potential to compete directly with the leaders. In contrast, Mercedes and Red Bull were able to extract more energy from their tires and maintain higher speeds through critical sectors, thanks to more efficient aerodynamics and superior tire heating characteristics. George Russell's approach in the central sector, where he focused on acceleration to increase top speed, serves as an example of how Mercedes was able to extract maximum performance even when braking earlier than Red Bull. Max Verstappen's deliberate brake modulation and careful throttle application, combined with the natural efficiency of the RB21, allowed him to maintain tires at optimal operating temperatures, giving him a clear advantage over both Ferrari and McLaren. These small yet critical differences underline why the gap in braking and cornering performance was so noticeable during the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Overall, the Ferrari SF-25's performance issues during the race were not purely due to driver error or minor setup choices. The data suggests a structural challenge in maintaining ideal tire temperatures and maximizing grip under braking, which ultimately limited both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton from competing at their full potential. The comparison with Mercedes and Red Bull highlights how even small variations in tire energy management and aerodynamic efficiency can have a significant impact on race pace, especially on circuits like Baku that combine high-speed straights with tight technical corners. The McLaren MCL-39, while slightly more stable in braking phases, also struggled to capitalize fully on its potential due to traffic and limited tire management options. Lando Norris's inability to run free laps until later in the stint meant that he could not extract the maximum potential from the car, reinforcing the importance of strategic positioning in addition to pure technical performance. Lewis Hamilton, by contrast, demonstrated a more consistent approach, managing tire temperatures effectively once the medium compounds were in play, but still facing challenges in corner entry due to the inherent characteristics of the SF-25.